He arrived in silence, stepping out of the black sedan just as the clouds parted above the small-town cemetery. It was a cold November afternoon, quiet, grey, the air thick with that familiar weight of grief. The mourners barely glanced at him as he approached the grave, his black coat buttoned to the neck, his hands shoved deep in his pockets. He didn't cry, didn't speak, just stood there, still and distant, as the priest spoke about the woman they had lost, Evelyn Hart, his mother, his last living parent, his anchor, and now, gone. They said his name was Daniel Hart, 34 years old, lived alone 2 towns over. Hadn't seen much of him in the years before Evelyn's death. Not since his father's accident. Some said he couldn't handle loss. Others whispered about the estrangement. How Daniel had always been the quiet one. Artistic. Brilliant. But sensitive. He left town when he was 23 and rarely returned. But now, here he was, back at the edge of his mother's grave, just long enough to say goodbye. After the burial, Daniel lingered as the others drifted away. One family friend remembered seeing him staring into the woods behind the cemetery. Just standing. Thinking. A man alone with his thoughts. That was the last confirmed sighting. No one saw him drive away. No one saw him go home. But the next morning, his car was found, doors locked, wallet inside, abandoned near the old steel bridge 3 miles from town. That's when the search began. And what they found were footprints. Clear ones. Daniel's size. Leading down a muddy path, onto the riverbank, and straight to the water's edge. But none coming back. The river was calm that morning, too calm, they said. It moved in slow ripples, wide and cold, the kind of water that could swallow anything without a sound. The sheriff's department taped off the area just after dawn. A pair of Daniel's shoes had been found neatly placed beside the trail, just a few feet from where his footprints ended. His coat, too, folded strangely, as if he'd taken it off carefully. For some, it looked like a ritual. For others, it screamed of despair. But when the divers arrived and began their sweep of the river's edge, there was nothing. No body. No splash witnesses. No drag marks in the mud. Just clean footprints and silence. Daniel's phone was never recovered. Nor was his sketchbook, the one his mother said he always carried. His friends, few as they were, described him as distant in recent years. He got darker after his father died, one former classmate said. Like something in him broke. He never really came back after that. And yet, others remembered his warmth, his talent for drawing, the way he used to leave handmade cards in people's mailboxes when they were grieving. Daniel felt everything too much, one neighbor said. That was his gift, and maybe his curse. As the hours turned into days, the official search expanded. Drones, sonar, riverbank patrols. But there was still no trace of Daniel. Just those shoes. That coat. And the growing suspicion that maybe this wasn't an accident. Maybe it wasn't even a suicide. Because nothing about the scene made sense. There were no drag marks, no slip, no personal note, no witness. It was as if Daniel had walked into the river and disappeared. Some locals whispered about the river's history. Old stories of people going missing near that same stretch decades ago. Others wondered if grief had driven him to something symbolic, something final. But a few believed something darker. That Daniel hadn't walked into the river at all, but that someone had made it look like he had. 2 days after Daniel disappeared, his cousin Riley came forward with something he hadn't told police. A week before the funeral, Daniel had sent him a package. No note, no explanation. Just a worn, leather-bound sketchbook tied shut with a piece of string. Inside were dozens of charcoal drawings, most of them abstract, dark, textured. But toward the back, Riley found something different. A series of haunting sketches of a man standing at the edge of a river. In each drawing, the figure moved closer and closer to the water, until, in the final image, he was gone. Only ripples remained. No signature. No dates. Just a single phrase scribbled in the margin of the last page. They say the dead speak louder in water. When investigators reviewed the sketchbook, some saw it as a suicide note in art form. Others saw it as a premonition, or worse, a warning. Riley insisted Daniel wasn't suicidal. He said Daniel had been withdrawn, yes, but not hopeless. In fact, Daniel had told him he was considering moving back to town to care for his mother before she passed. He said he felt like the past was pulling him back, Riley recalled. Like unfinished business was waiting for him here. Then came the voicemail. On the night before the funeral, Daniel had left his mother's home after staying there briefly to collect some things. On his way out, he left a message on Riley's phone that simply said, "If something happens, check the river. It remembers." Riley had chalked it up to grief. But now, he wasn't so sure. The town's curiosity grew into quiet dread. Local forums and Facebook pages filled with speculation. Some believed Daniel had been consumed by guilt over family secrets no one ever spoke about. Others wondered if he had been followed that night, lured to the river. A few conspiracy threads even connected his disappearance to an old unsolved drowning in the same area 20 years prior. Whatever the theory, one thing was clear. Daniel had been trying to say something, and no one had listened in time. The Hart family had always lived near the water. Their old farmhouse sat just 5 miles upriver, past a thicket of pine trees and a crumbling wooden fence. It was the kind of place that felt suspended in time, quiet, slightly forgotten, and full of ghosts. Evelyn Hart had lived there nearly her whole life. Her husband, Thomas, drowned in that same river 12 years earlier during what police called a boating accident. Daniel never believed that. He told close friends the story changed every time Evelyn spoke of it. Sometimes claiming it was the fog, sometimes saying she never saw him leave the dock at all. The day of Evelyn's funeral, a family friend named Martha pulled Daniel aside. She hadn't seen him since he was a teenager, but she remembered the day Thomas died. "Your mother wasn't herself for weeks after that," she said. But it wasn't grief. It was fear. She thought someone was watching the house. Daniel didn't say much, but later that night, he scribbled something in his notebook. Something police found torn and water-stained after his disappearance. Just 6 words. It started with her. And him. As the investigation deepened, detectives began to wonder whether Daniel had uncovered something buried with his father. Was it an accident? A cover-up? A secret his mother took to her grave? The timing felt too exact. He returned for her funeral, visited the farmhouse one last time, and within 48 hours, vanished at the same stretch of river where his father had died. But there was more. According to Riley, Daniel had confided that strange things had started happening during the week before the funeral. Items in the farmhouse were moved, an old family photo had gone missing, and on 2 occasions, he found wet footprints inside the house, despite it being locked. "He told me," Riley said, voice shaking, "that he felt like something was pulling at him. Like the river wasn't done with his family yet." 4 days after Daniel went missing, a retired fisherman named Bill Carter contacted the sheriff's department. He'd been out checking lines near the bend in the river, just a mile downstream from where Daniel's shoes were found, when something caught his eye. Beneath the water's surface, tangled in a fallen branch, was a tattered piece of black fabric. He pulled it free. It was part of a coat lining. The material matched the one Daniel had worn to the funeral. Nearby, just off the trail near the old Hart family dock, searchers found something even more chilling. A page from a notebook, soaked and barely legible, pinned beneath a river rock. When dried carefully, 3 words emerged, faint but unmistakable. She knew everything. The page was sent for handwriting analysis. It was Daniel's. But the context? A mystery. Who was she? His mother? Martha? Or someone else entirely? Rumors swirled faster now. Evelyn's death, which had originally been ruled natural, was re-examined. But the coroner stood firm, heart failure. Still, some whispered about foul play, suggesting Daniel may have discovered something at the farmhouse that disturbed him deeply. The townspeople, once quietly curious, became obsessed. Reddit threads bloomed with maps, timelines, drone footage, and side-by-side comparisons of Daniel's sketchbook art. One user zoomed in on a 2010 photo of the old dock and circled what they claimed was a faint outline of a man in the water. It was probably nothing, But in a case this haunting, nothing began to feel like everything. At the center of it all was the river, wide, cold, and ancient. It had taken Daniel's father. Now maybe it had taken him too. But the more investigators combed its banks, the more it seemed the river hadn't taken anything. It had simply witnessed it all, and said nothing. A week after the search was called off, Daniel's old phone number, previously assumed disconnected, pinged a cell tower on the far side of town. It was a brief signal, gone in seconds. Investigators traced it to a wooded area near the old train tracks, a place Daniel used to visit as a teenager. But they found nothing. No phone, no footprints. Just a rusted bench overlooking the river and a small pile of dried flowers, freshly picked, wilted by the sun. Then came the voicemail. It had been buried deep in Evelyn Hart's landline answering machine, discovered when Riley returned to the farmhouse to pack away her things. The timestamp was dated 2 nights before Daniel vanished. In the message, Daniel's voice was calm, almost too calm. "I think I found what they were hiding. She didn't tell me everything. But the river, it remembers. I'll send proof." No other proof arrived. But the message stunned those closest to the case. It seemed clear now. Daniel hadn't been planning to disappear. He was investigating something. Possibly something his mother or father had hidden for decades. Enter Clara Nash, the local historical society archivist. When she learned of Daniel's disappearance and the location of the farmhouse, she reached out to investigators with something unusual. That land, she said, used to belong to the Archer family until 1897. She handed over a brittle newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Tragedy on Coldwater Bend. Family of 4 lost to the river." Clara explained that the property had long been rumored cursed. Local law spoke of voices heard at night near the river, objects moved, disappearances unsolved. Most wrote it off as backwoods folklore. But the Hart farmhouse had been built just 2 years after that tragedy, on top of the very land where the Archers once lived. Clara's final words to the detectives were barely above a whisper. He was right. That river doesn't forget. Riley wasn't looking for answers when he opened the old photo album. He was just trying to remember, to hold on to something from a family that now felt like it had disappeared, piece by piece. He flipped past the usual snapshots. Daniel as a boy, Evelyn gardening, birthdays on the porch. But then he found it. A photograph he didn't remember ever seeing before. It was old, maybe from the late 80s. Black and white. Daniel must have been 7 or 8. He stood beside his mother at the river's edge, their reflections rippling across the water. Evelyn's hand rested tightly on Daniel's shoulder. Her expression was wrong. Not soft. Not maternal. More like fear. Behind them, partially obscured by branches, was a figure. Faint, distant. A man, standing just on the tree line near the riverbank, watching. The resolution was grainy, but it was clear enough. Riley felt the chill before he even blinked. He had seen this man before, in one of Daniel's final sketches. The same posture, the same hollow eyes, the same empty stare from the woods. He showed the photo to Clara Nash, who went pale. She rummaged through her archive drawers and returned with a yellowed missing person flyer from 1991. The name, Alan Griggs, age 29. Vanished during a camping trip at Coldwater Bend. Last seen, just a mile from the Hart farmhouse. Side by side, the resemblance was haunting. Riley brought both to the sheriff. They sent the photo to forensics, hoping to clarify the figure's identity. But the photo went missing during transfer. Misplaced, they said. Maybe damaged. Maybe erased. Maybe something else. That was the moment Riley stopped believing this was just about Daniel. He started to believe the river didn't just take people. It kept them. Riley hadn't slept in days. He kept hearing the voicemail in his head. Daniel's voice, low and calm, whispering, "Check the river. It remembers." He visited the farmhouse one last time, more out of desperation than hope. The rooms felt colder now. The walls seemed to absorb sound. Every creak of the floorboards felt like someone following him. When he stood on the back porch and looked toward the river, It wasn't just fear he felt. It was dread, like the place itself was watching. He walked down the old trail Daniel used to take as a boy, past the pine trees and the crumbling fence, until he reached the river's edge. The current was slow, glassy, unnaturally still. Riley sat there for nearly an hour, listening. Just wind, just water. Until something shifted. Not a splash, nothing loud. Just a faint sound, like someone speaking underwater. He froze. It came again. A whisper, garbled but human. He leaned closer. Riley. He stepped back. The wind moved through the trees. He waited, breath held. Then, a ripple. Just one. And silence. He left shaken, unable to tell if what he heard was real, or the weight of grief playing tricks. But when he returned to his car, he noticed something strange. On the windshield, someone had drawn a symbol in the dust, a spiral. Small, deliberate. The same symbol Daniel had once carved into the side of his sketchbook. No one had touched that symbol since he disappeared. Riley didn't report it. He just sat behind the wheel, heart racing, staring at the river in his rearview mirror. "You were trying to tell us something," he whispered. "But we didn't listen." That night, he posted one final message to the town forum. "I don't think Daniel's body will ever be found. Because I don't think he's dead. Not exactly. I think he crossed into whatever took our fathers, our secrets, and now him." The spiral kept showing up. Not just on Daniel's sketchbook or the windshield dust. Riley started seeing it in places that didn't make sense. Scratched faintly into the back of an old church pew. Painted in red on a rusted metal sign near the river trail. Even etched into the foundation stone of the Hart farmhouse, nearly hidden beneath decades of grime. At first, he thought it was coincidence. Then, obsession. But the more he searched, the more it became clear, Daniel hadn't invented the symbol. He had found it. And maybe it had found him, too. Clara Nash remembered it. She dug through an old surveyor's journal from the late 1800s, notes taken during land assessments before the Hart house was built. One margin held a sketch nearly identical to Daniel's spiral, marked beside a short sentence. "The mark appears again by cold water." Riley posted a photo of the spiral on a private online group for obscure symbols and folklore. A reply came the next day, from a user who claimed to study pre-colonial river rituals in the Northeast. The message was brief. "You need to stop looking. That symbol doesn't invite answers. It invites return." But it was already too late. The spiral wasn't just a symbol. It was a map. Not a place on land, but a path inward. Daniel had been mapping his descent for months, perhaps longer, through sketches, notes, and that last voicemail. The river wasn't just water. It was memory, a carrier of all things buried. Grief, guilt, secrets, and maybe even something older than all of them. Riley returned to the river one final time. This time, he brought the sketchbook and placed it on the dock, pages open. He whispered Daniel's name. Waited. Listened. Nothing. Until the wind shifted. And one page turned on its own. They never found Daniel's body. The case was marked as presumed drowned, the files slowly buried beneath newer tragedies. But no one close to him truly believed he was gone. Not in the ordinary sense. His cousin Riley still drives out to the river once a month, placing a new page from Daniel's sketchbook at the edge of the dock. Most of them blow away. One remained for nearly a week, stuck beneath a loose board. It held no drawing, just words, faded and smudged. "She finally told me. It's not over." People still talk about the river, of course. How it seems to change, as if it's waiting. Hikers report strange sounds. Some say they've seen someone standing knee-deep in the water near sunset, just watching, never moving, and always gone before anyone gets close. Evelyn's house was sold, then abandoned. The new owners didn't last a month. They complained of strange footprints on the floorboards and the sound of dripping water when the pipes were bone dry. The old dock, rotting and split down the middle, is now considered off-limits. But the townspeople still walk by, some stopping long enough to leave a stone on the edge. A sign of memory, a quiet prayer. A recognition of the one who vanished without a trace, after the funeral, led by footsteps into the river, and never seen again. Maybe Daniel didn't drown. Maybe he uncovered something too heavy to carry, and left us clues, hoping someone would listen. Maybe the river took him. Or maybe he chose to go, because it was the only place that ever made sense. Thank you for watching the Vanished Echo Stories. If this story moved you, or left you wondering what truths still sleep beneath the surface, let us know in the comments below. Every vanished soul leaves behind an echo. We're here to listen, and to keep their stories alive. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss the next mystery. Until next time, stay aware, stay compassionate. And remember, the silence always has something to say.